The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Ikoyi Cemetery in Lagos, where over 3,000 mourners had gathered to witness the burial of Mama Adunni Okonkwo, the billionaire matriarch who had built an empire from selling Gary at Oshodi Market to owning the largest food distribution network in West Africa. The sprawling cemetery, with its ancient Iroko trees and elaborate tombstones, had seen many grand funerals, but nothing quite like this. Government ministers, bank executives, and business tycoons all stood in their finest black traditional attire, waiting as the solid gold-plated casket was slowly lowered toward the elaborate marble tomb. "Stop! She's not dead." The shocking words exploded from 9-year-old Tunde Okonkwo just as the casket was suspended halfway into the ground. The youngest grandchild of the deceased broke free from his mother's grasp and ran toward the grave, his small legs pumping furiously across the manicured grass. His white shirt, which his mother had carefully ironed that morning, was already soaked with sweat and tears. The mechanical winch grinding the casket down came to an abrupt halt. The crowd gasped collectively, a sound like wind rushing through the palm trees overhead. Tunde's father, Adebayo Okonkwo, lunged forward to grab his son, but the boy dodged him with surprising agility, reaching the edge of the grave. "I saw her finger move. Right now. She moved," Tunde screamed, pointing at the casket's glass viewing panel. "Mama Adunni is still alive. Please, somebody help her." What would you do if you witnessed this shocking moment? Hit like if you believe children can see things adults miss, and comment below where you're watching from. Chief Femi Okonkwo, Adunni's eldest son and heir to her vast business empire, pushed through the crowd, his elaborate agbada billowing behind him. His face was twisted with rage and embarrassment. "Remove this child immediately. He's traumatized and talking nonsense." He gestured frantically to the security guards positioned around the perimeter. But Tunde wouldn't be silenced. He fell to his knees at the grave's edge, his small hands gripping the marble. "She's trying to tell us something. Look at her hand. Please, Uncle Femi, look." The funeral director, Mr. Bankole, a thin man who had overseen the burials of Lagos's elite for 30 years, stepped forward nervously. "Chief Okonkwo, perhaps we should." "Should what?" Femi roared, his voice carrying across the cemetery. "Desecrate my mother's funeral because of a child's imagination? The doctors confirmed her death 3 days ago. 3 different doctors. This is a disgrace." Among the crowd, whispers began spreading like wildfire. Some mourners moved closer, craning their necks to see the casket, while others backed away, frightened by the supernatural implications. The photographers from society magazines and newspapers, who had come to document the funeral of the year, now had their cameras trained on the unfolding drama. Adunni's daughter, Auntie Saad, who had flown in from London where she ran the family's European operations, suddenly spoke up. She had been standing quietly with her own children, but something in Tunde's voice made her step forward. "Wait," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Let the child speak. What exactly did you see, Tunde?" The boy looked up at his aunt gratefully, tears streaming down his face. "When they were closing the casket at the viewing this morning, I saw her finger twitch. Just her pinky finger. I tried to tell Daddy, but he said I was seeing things because I was sad. But just now, when the casket tilted as it was going down, I saw it again through the glass. Her whole hand moved." The crowd was now in complete turmoil. Some women had begun praying loudly, calling on Jesus and Allah in equal measure. Others were filming with their phones, the footage already being uploaded to Instagram and Twitter. The hashtag Ikoyi Cemetery Miracle would be trending within the hour. Chief Femi's wife, Bola, dressed in elaborate black lace that cost more than most people's annual salary, grabbed her husband's arm. "This is turning into a circus," she hissed. "Think of what people will say. Think of the family name." But surprisingly, it was Mama Adunni's youngest son, Deli, who had been quiet until now, who stepped forward. Deli had always been considered the weak one in the family, overshadowed by Femi's business acumen and Sada's international success. He managed the family's charitable foundation and had been closest to their mother in her final years. "Open the casket," he said simply. Have you lost your mind? Femi turned on his brother. You want to turn our mother's funeral into a spectacle? It already is one, Deli replied calmly, gesturing at the phones recording them. If we don't open it and the child is wrong, people will say we were simply being thorough. But if we don't open it and by some chance he's right, he let the words hang in the air. The traditional rulers present, the obas and chiefs who had come to pay their respects, began conferring among themselves. The eldest among them, the Oba of Lagos himself, raised his ceremonial staff. The child should be heard, he pronounced, his voice carrying ancient authority. In Yoruba tradition, children are closer to the spirit world. Open the casket. Chief Femi looked around desperately, seeking support, but found none. Even his own business partners were nodding in agreement with the Oba. The spiritual implications of ignoring such a claim were too significant in a society where tradition and modernity walked hand in hand. With visible reluctance, Femi nodded to Mr. Bankole. Raise the casket, he commanded. The mechanical winch whirred to life again, this time in reverse. Slowly, agonizingly, the golden casket rose from the grave. The crowd pressed forward, forming a tight circle. Security guards struggled to maintain order. When the casket was finally back on ground level, Mr. Bankole's assistants carefully placed it on the wooden platform that had been used earlier. Tund had not moved from his position, his eyes fixed on the casket with an intensity that seemed beyond his years. His mother, Funk, had finally reached him and held him close, but she too was staring at the casket now, a strange hope flickering in her eyes. Mr. Bankole's hands shook as he approached the casket's locks. The cemetery had gone completely silent except for the distant sound of Lagos traffic and the occasional sob from the crowd. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing, as if nature itself was holding its breath. The locks clicked open one by one. 6 locks in total, each one seeming to echo across the cemetery. Chief Femi stood rigid, his jaw clenched, already preparing the speech he would give to apologize for this embarrassment. His wife Bola was already on her phone, texting their public relations team to prepare for damage control. The lid began to rise. The silk interior, specially imported from Paris, gleamed in the afternoon sun, and there lay Mama Adunni, resplendent in her purple and gold iro and buba, the same outfit she had worn to receive her national honor from the president just last year. Her jewelry, the coral beads, the gold bangles that marked her as a woman of substance, caught the light. Her face was peaceful, dignified even in death. For a long moment, nothing happened. The crowd waited. Chief Femi was about to speak, to end this charade, when suddenly, unmistakably, Mama Adunni's finger moved. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't the wind. Her pinky finger clearly, deliberately moved, followed by her ring finger, then her middle finger, as if she was trying to make a fist. The scream that erupted from the crowd could probably be heard all the way in Oshodi. Women fainted. Men stumbled backward. The Oba's guards rushed to protect him, thinking this might be some kind of attack. Photographers went crazy, their cameras clicking so fast it sounded like machine gun fire. She's alive, Saad screamed, pushing everyone aside to reach her mother. Mama is alive. But it was what happened next that would haunt everyone present for years to come. Mama Adunni's eyes snapped open, not slowly, not gradually, but suddenly and completely. And the first person she looked at was Chief Femi. The look in those eyes wasn't confusion or gratitude. It was accusation. You, she whispered, her voice hoarse but clear enough for those closest to hear. You did this to me. Chief Femi staggered backward as if he'd been shot. His wife Bola dropped her phone, her face draining of color. The crowd erupted into chaos, but Tund stood perfectly still, his child's intuition vindicated in the most dramatic way possible. As people rushed to help Mama Adunni sit up, as bottles of water appeared from nowhere, as the cemetery turned into a scene of jubilation and confusion, one thing was becoming terrifyingly clear. This was no medical mistake. The domestic betrayal that had nearly led to a living burial was about to be exposed, and the Okonkwo family empire would never be the same. The matriarch who had built an empire from nothing, who had survived poverty, military coups, and economic crashes, had now survived her own funeral, and someone was going to pay for trying to bury her alive. The Okonkwo family compound in Victoria Island had been transformed into something resembling a war zone and a celebration simultaneously. Just 6 hours after the shocking events at Ikoyi Cemetery, hundreds of people had gathered outside the gates, some celebrating Mama Aduni's miraculous return from the dead, others demanding answers. Inside the sprawling mansion, the family was gathered in the massive living room, where portraits of deceased family members looked down from the walls like silent judges. Mama Aduni sat in her favorite chair, a throne-like piece of furniture she'd bought after closing her first Millionaire deal decades ago. Despite her ordeal, she looked remarkably composed, dressed now in a simple blue bubu, sipping Zobo drink that her daughter Saad had prepared. The purple and gold burial outfit had been burned in the backyard, Mama Aduni insisting she never wanted to see it again. Young Tund sat at his grandmother's feet, her hand occasionally reaching down to pat his head affectionately. He had become the hero of the hour, the child whose innocent insistence had saved a life. His parents, Adebayo and Funk, stood protectively nearby, still processing the fact that Adebayo's mother had nearly been buried alive. Chief Femi paced the room like a caged lion, his elaborate igbada replaced with a simple kaftan. His wife Bola sat rigidly on a sofa, her fingers nervously playing with her gold necklace. The accusation Mama Aduni had made at the cemetery hung in the air like smoke from a fire that wouldn't die. "Mama," Femi finally said, his voice strained, "you must understand how this looks. The doctors declared you dead. Dr. Akinwale, Dr. Osei, and even Dr. Mukoro all confirmed it. How could 3 qualified physicians make such a mistake?" Mama Aduni's eyes, still sharp despite her 78 years, fixed on her eldest son. "You tell me, Femi. You were the one who brought those doctors. You were the one who insisted on handling all the funeral arrangements. You were the one who rushed to have me buried within 3 days. It's our tradition." Femi protested, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Muslims bury quickly, and you always said you wanted a quick burial." "I'm not Muslim," Mama Aduni said quietly. "I'm Christian. You know this. We've attended the same church for 40 years. The room fell silent. Deli, who had been standing by the window watching the crowd outside, turned to face his brother. "She's right, Femi. Why did you tell everyone Mama wanted a Muslim burial? Why the rush?" "I was confused," Femi stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. The grief, the pressure of organizing everything. "Liar." The word cracked through the room like a whip. It wasn't Mama Aduni who had spoken, but Bola, Femi's own wife. She stood up suddenly, her whole body trembling. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be part of this evil." Everyone turned to stare at her. Femi's face went ashen. "Bola, what are you doing?" "I'm doing what I should have done 3 days ago," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Mama, forgive me. I knew what he was planning, and I said nothing because he threatened me, threatened to take my children away, threatened to destroy me if I spoke up." The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. Funk instinctively pulled Tun closer, covering his ears, but the boy gently removed her hands. "I need to hear this, Mummy," he said with surprising maturity. "Mama Aduni needs me to hear this." Bola continued, her words tumbling out like water from a broken dam. "It was about the will. The new will Mama made last month. Femi found out that she was planning to change everything, to give control of the company to Deli instead of him. She was going to announce it at the board meeting next week." Deli's mouth fell open. "What? Mama, is this true?" Mama Aduni nodded slowly. "I have my reasons. Femi, you've become too greedy, too ruthless. The workers complain. Our suppliers are squeezed until they can barely survive. That's not how I built this empire. I built it on fairness, on lifting others as we climbed. Deli understands this. He runs the foundation with compassion. So you decided to destroy me?" Femi exploded, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. 40 years I've worked for this company. 40 years, I've expanded your small food distribution business into a multi-billion naira empire. And you want to hand it to Delhi, who can barely manage a charity, and so you decided to kill me? Mama Aduni's voice was deadly quiet. It wasn't supposed to be killing, Femi shouted, then immediately realized his mistake. The room went completely silent. Even the noise from outside seemed to fade away. Saad pulled out her phone. I'm recording this. Everyone needs to hear this confession. Femi looked around wildly, like a trapped animal. It was just supposed to be a deep sleep. The drugs Dr. Akinwale gave her. They said she would sleep so deeply that she would appear dead, but would wake up in 12 to 24 hours. It's used in some countries for what? Delhi demanded. For faking deaths? For inheritance fraud? I was going to have her rescued. Femi said desperately. After the will was read, after I had secured everything, I was going to discover she was still alive in the family mausoleum. It would have been a miracle. She would have been confused, unable to remember anything, and the will would have already been executed. But you buried her in the ground, Funk said, horror in her voice. If Tund hadn't stopped it, she would have suffocated in that casket underground. The mausoleum plan changed, Bolas said quietly. The cemetery director insisted on immediate burial because of the heat. Femi panicked. He thought the drug would wear off after she was buried, and she couldn't continue. And I would die underground, screaming and clawing at my own casket, Mama Aduni finished. My own son, the child I carried for 9 months, the one I sacrificed everything to educate, wanted me to die in terror and darkness for money. Tun suddenly stood up and walked over to his Uncle Femi. The big man looked down at the small boy, and something in Tun's eyes made him take a step back. Mama Aduni always told me that money shows who people really are, Tun said, his young voice clear and strong. She said some people let money make them better, and some let it make them monsters. You became a monster, Uncle Femi. The sound of sirens began to filter through from outside. Delhi had apparently called the authorities while everyone was focused on Femi's confession. The security guards at the gate, loyal to Mama Aduni rather than Femi, would let them in. Mama, Femi dropped to his knees, crawling toward his mother's chair. Please, I'm your son, your firstborn. Remember when I was little? Remember how you used to call me your prince? Please don't let them take me. Mama Aduni looked down at him, and for a moment, her eyes softened with the memory of the little boy he had been. Then they hardened again. The son I raised died somewhere along the way. You're someone else now. Someone who would murder his own mother for money. The door burst open. Police officers flooded in, led by Commissioner Adeyemi himself. The scandal was too big for anyone less than the top brass to handle. As they put handcuffs on Femi, he looked around the room one last time. You'll destroy everything without me, he said. The company will collapse. Our competitors will eat us alive. You'll see. Within a year, everything Mama built will be gone. No, Mama Aduni said, standing up with surprising strength. Everything you built on greed and cruelty might collapse. But the foundation I laid, the one built on treating people right, that will survive. Delhi will make sure of it. And Tund, she looked down at her youngest grandchild. Tund will learn the business the right way. Won't you, my child? Tund nodded solemnly. Yes, Mama Aduni. But first, I want to learn to be good like you. As the police led Femi away, Bola following to give her statement, the family stood in shocked silence. The betrayal was complete, devastating, but they had survived it. More importantly, Mama Aduni had survived it. Outside, the crowd had grown even larger. News vans had arrived. The story was spreading across Nigeria and beyond. #BuriedAlive was trending worldwide. The domestic betrayal, the cheating spouse who had chosen money over family, the emotional manipulation that had nearly led to murder. It was all coming to light. Mama Aduni walked to the window and looked out at the crowd. Some were holding candles now, as evening approached. Others held signs saying, Miracle Adekoyi and the boy who saved his grandmother. What do we do now, Mama? Saad asked, joining her at the window. Now we heal, Mama Aduni said. We rebuild. We show Nigeria that family isn't about blood alone, but about loyalty. And we make sure that no one ever again mistakes kindness for weakness in this family." She turned to Tund, who had come to stand beside her. "And you, my young hero, what do you want?" Tund thought for a moment. "I want to go back to school and tell my friends that my grandmother is the strongest person in the world, and that she's not dead." For the first time since her awakening, Mama Adunni laughed, a real, deep laugh that filled the room. "No, my child, I'm definitely not dead. Thanks to you." As night fell over Lagos, the Okonkwo family began the long process of rebuilding. The empire would survive, but more importantly, the family would survive stronger and wiser. The domestic betrayal had been exposed, the emotional manipulation defeated by a child's pure insistence on truth. But in the shadows of the city, in a prison cell waiting for bail that might never come, Femi sat planning. This wasn't over. He had spent 40 years building his network, his connections. One way or another, he would get what he believed was rightfully his. The empire his mother had built would be his, even if he had to destroy everyone in his path to get it. The battle for the Okonkwo fortune had only just begun. 3 weeks had passed since the scandal at Ikoyi Cemetery, and the Okonkwo food distribution empire was facing its darkest hour. Mama Adunni stood in the boardroom of the headquarters in Marina, Lagos, looking out at the sprawling city below. The conference table behind her was covered with newspapers, all carrying variations of the same story. Okonkwo empire in crisis. Major suppliers pull out. Stock prices plummet. Deli sat at the table, his usually calm face etched with worry. Since taking over as interim CEO, he had discovered just how deep Femi's corruption ran. "Mama, it's worse than we thought. Femi has been embezzling for years, hiding it in offshore accounts. But more importantly, he's been bribing our major suppliers and distributors. Now that he's in prison awaiting trial, they're all pulling out." "How bad is it?" Mama Adunni asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "We've lost 60% of our supply chain. The Chinese rice importers, the Thai seafood suppliers, even the local farmers' cooperatives. Femi had illegal deals with all of them. Without his bribes, they're going to our competitors." Deli rubbed his temples, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. The door opened, and Saad entered, having flown back from London to help save the family business. "The British investors are pulling out too. They say the scandal has made us unreliable. We need a miracle, Mama." Mama Adunni turned from the window, her face set with determination. "Then we'll create one. Call a press conference for tomorrow. Every media house in Nigeria. We're going to do something unprecedented." "What do you have in mind?" Deli asked. "We're going to tell the truth. All of it. And we're going to rebuild this company the way it should have been run from the beginning, with integrity." The next day, the ballroom at the Eco Hotel was packed with journalists, business partners, and curious members of the public. Mama Adunni walked to the podium, but she wasn't alone. Young Tund was with her, dressed in his school uniform, standing tall despite the flash of hundreds of cameras. "Nigeria," Mama Adunni began, her voice strong despite her recent ordeal. "I built this company from nothing, from selling Gary in Oshodi Market to feeding millions across West Africa. But somewhere along the way, I failed. I failed to see that my own son had turned my dream into something corrupt and rotten." The room was dead silent, everyone hanging on her words. "Today, I'm not here to save the Okonkwo Empire as it was. I'm here to burn it down and build something better from the ashes. And I'm going to do it with the help of this young man." She placed her hand on Tund's shoulder, who reminded me that truth is more valuable than profit. Tund stepped forward to the microphone, which had to be lowered for him. When he spoke, his voice was clear and confident. "My name is Tund Okonkwo. I'm 9 years old. 3 weeks ago, I saved my grandmother's life because I believed what I saw, even when adults told me I was wrong. Today, I want to tell you what I see in our family business." He pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket. "I spent the last week visiting our warehouses with Mama Adunni. I saw workers who haven't been paid in months. I saw expired goods being repackaged with new dates. I saw small suppliers being cheated. This isn't the company my grandmother built, but we can fix it." The journalists were frantically taking notes, completely captivated by the child's honesty and courage. Mama Adunni returned to the microphone. Effective immediately, we are implementing the TUND principles, named after my grandson who sees truth where adults see convenience. First, all our financial records will be made public. Every naira in, every naira out. Second, we will pay all our debts to small suppliers first, even if it means the big ones have to wait. Third, any employee who has been cheated will be compensated with interest. You'll go bankrupt, someone shouted from the crowd. Perhaps, Mama Adunni smiled, but we'll go bankrupt with honor. However, I don't think we will. You see, this morning, something remarkable happened. She gestured to the side door, and in walked a group of women, all dressed in traditional attire. The crowd recognized some of them, market women leaders from Lagos's biggest markets. These women, Mama Adunni continued, remember when I was one of them, when I helped them start their own businesses, when the Okonkwo name meant trust, not betrayal. They have agreed to supply us directly, cutting out the corrupt middleman my son created. Aya Basira, the leader of the market women, took the microphone. Adunni helped me send my 5 children to university. She gave me my first loan with no interest. We, the Market Women Association of Lagos, stand with the real Okonkwo empire, the one built on helping each other rise. The room erupted in amazement. This was unprecedented, the informal economy formally partnering with a major corporation. But the surprises weren't over. Deli came forward with a tablet in his hand. We've also discovered something in Femi's hidden files. Evidence of our competitors' involvement in the corruption. Chief among them is the Adashina Corporation, who paid Femi to sabotage our own operations to benefit them. The journalists went wild. This was becoming the business story of the decade. We're not just rebuilding, Saad added, joining her family at the podium. We're exposing everyone who participated in this corruption. The domestic betrayal in our family was just the tip of the iceberg. The entire industry is rotten with emotional manipulation, cheating spouses using family businesses for personal gain, and public disgrace hidden behind closed doors. A reporter raised her hand. Mrs. Okonkwo, aren't you afraid of retaliation? It was Tund who answered. My grandmother taught me that fear is what allows evil to grow. We're not afraid anymore. The press conference continued for another hour, with the family laying out their complete restructuring plan. By the time it ended, hashtag Tund Principles was trending globally. International investors who had pulled out were calling back, intrigued by this radical transparency. That evening, back at the family compound, they gathered for dinner. A simple meal of jollof rice and chicken, nothing like the elaborate feasts of before. Mama Adunni looked around the table at her reduced but united family. You know, Femi won't stop, Deli said quietly. Even from prison, he has connections. He'll fight this. Let him, Mama Adunni said. We have something he never understood, the power of truth. And we have Tund, our secret weapon. Tund grinned, rice on his chin. Mama Adunni, can I ask you something? Anything, my child. When you were in that casket, could you hear us? Could you hear me calling for you? The room went quiet. Mama Adunni's eyes grew distant. Yes, I could hear everything. I was screaming inside, but my body wouldn't move. I could hear the prayers, the cries, your uncle talking about the will. And then I heard your voice, so strong, so sure. She's not dead, you said. And in that moment, I found the strength to move my finger. You didn't just see me, Tund. You saved me with your faith. The emotional moment was interrupted by Funk's phone buzzing. She looked at it and gasped. Femi has been granted bail. Someone paid 50 million naira. He's being released tonight. The family exchanged worried looks. They all knew what this meant. Femi had powerful allies, and the battle for the empire was far from over. Double the security, Mama Adunni ordered. And, Tund, you'll be staying with me tonight. If Femi thinks he can intimidate us, he's about to learn that this family doesn't break anymore. As night fell over Lagos, the Okonkwo compound became a fortress. But unknown to them, Femi wasn't planning a direct attack. He had something far more devastating in mind, a secret that could destroy not just the business, but the entire family. A secret about Mama Adunni's past that he had kept hidden for 40 years, waiting for the perfect moment to use it. And that moment was now. Comment below if you think the family can survive Femi's revenge. What secrets do you think he's hiding? Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next chapter. The revelation came at dawn, delivered not by Femi himself, but by his lawyer, Mr. Atagoke, a sharp-dressed man who arrived at the Okonkwo compound in a black Mercedes with tinted windows. The security guards, on high alert since Femi's release, thoroughly searched him before allowing entry. He carried only a manila envelope, but what it contained would shake the family to its core. Mama Adunni received him in the main living room, flanked by Deli and Saad. Tund sat in the corner, having refused to leave his grandmother's side since learning of his uncle's release. The lawyer's face was unreadable as he placed the envelope on the coffee table. My client, Chief Femi Okonkwo, has instructed me to deliver this to you, he said formally. He wants you to know that he would prefer to handle this matter privately, within the family. However, if you continue with the prosecution and the public destruction of what he calls his rightful inheritance, he will have no choice but to make these documents public. What documents? Deli demanded, reaching for the envelope, but Mama Adunni stopped him with a raised hand. I'll handle this, she said, her voice steady. But Tund noticed her hands trembling slightly as she opened the envelope. As she read, her face, usually so strong and composed, crumbled. The papers fell from her hands, scattering across the floor. Saad quickly gathered them up, reading rapidly. Her gasp echoed through the room. Mama, this can't be true. These are lies, forgeries. What is it? Deli grabbed the papers from his sister. As he read, his face went through a series of transformations: confusion, disbelief, and finally shock. The marriage certificate, the business registration. Mama, the lawyer stood up, adjusting his tie. Chief Femi has given you 48 hours to withdraw all charges and sign over 70% of the company to him. Otherwise, these documents go to every media house in Nigeria. He walked toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I advised against this. Using such personal matters as leverage is distasteful. But your son is desperate, madam, and desperate men do desperate things. After he left, the family sat in stunned silence. Finally, young Tund, who had been watching everything with his characteristic intensity, walked over to his grandmother. What do the papers say, Mama Adunni? He asked softly. Mama Adunni looked at her grandson, tears in her eyes, the first time anyone had seen her cry since this whole ordeal began. They say that I was already married when I married your grandfather, that the Okonkwo Empire was built on bigamy, lies, and fraud, that everything we have is illegitimate. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Mama Adunni began to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. I was 15 years old when my father sold me to a man named Chief Akintola in our village in Osun State. Not married, sold, like a goat at the market, to pay off his gambling debts. Akintola was 55 years old, had 3 other wives, and was known for his cruelty. The traditional ceremony was performed, but I ran away on the wedding night. She paused, lost in memories that she had buried for decades. I fled to Lagos with nothing but the clothes on my back. I was a child, alone, scared, selling Gary on the streets to survive. Then I met your grandfather, Emeka Okonkwo. He was kind, educated, different. When he asked me to marry him, I said yes. I never told him about Akintola. I thought that village ceremony meant nothing. I was a child sold against my will. But legally, technically, Femi is right. My marriage to Emeka wasn't valid. Which means the entire inheritance is questionable. Deli finished, his legal mind already seeing the implications. Femi could challenge everything. The will, the company ownership, all of it. But that's not fair. Tund burst out. You were a child. You were forced. The law doesn't always care about fairness, my child, Mama Adunni said sadly. Saad paced the room, her business mind working furiously. If this gets out, it's not just about the legal implications. The scandal, the public disgrace, our partners will flee. The banks will call on their loans. Everything we announced at the press conference about rebuilding with integrity will be seen as hypocrisy. Maybe that's what we deserve, Mama Adunni said quietly. I built this empire on a lie. No, Tun's voice was fierce. You built this empire on hard work, on helping others, on being good to people. Uncle Femi is the liar. He's the one who tried to kill you. He's the cheat. Funk, who had been silent until now, spoke up. What if we call his bluff? What if we release the documents ourselves, tell the whole truth? We'd lose everything, Deli said. We're going to lose everything anyway, Funk countered. At least this way, we control the narrative. We tell the story of a 15-year-old girl who escaped child marriage, built an empire from nothing, and raised a family. Let Nigeria judge. The religious groups will condemn us, Saad pointed out. The traditional rulers will be outraged. A woman who ran from her husband, even a forced marriage. You know how our society views such things. As they debated, Tun slipped out of the room. No one noticed him leave, too caught up in their discussion of strategy and damage control. The boy walked purposefully through the compound to his grandmother's study, where he had seen her work late into the night so many times. He climbed on her chair and opened her laptop, his small fingers flying across the keyboard. Meanwhile, in his luxurious prison of a safe house across the city, Femi sat with his co-conspirators, Dr. Akinwale, who had provided the drugs, his business partner Emeka Nduka, and surprisingly, Chief Akintola's eldest son, Babatunde Akintola. Your mother thought she could escape her past, Babatunde said, sipping his whiskey. My father died, cursing her name, saying she brought shame to our family. When you contacted me with this plan, I knew it was divine justice. And the documents? Femi asked. All authentic. My father kept everything. The marriage certificate, the bride price receipts, even photographs from the ceremony. Your mother was legally married to him until his death 10 years ago. Every marriage after that, every document with her married name, all fraudulent. Femi smiled coldly. By the time we're done, she'll be in prison for fraud, the company will be mine, and the great Mama Adunni will be remembered as a bigamist and a liar. Back at the compound, the family's discussion was interrupted by Tund returning to the room, holding his grandmother's laptop. I did something, he announced. What did you do? Mama Adunni asked, alarmed. Tund turned the laptop around. On the screen was a YouTube video, uploaded to the Stories by Tino channel that he had created. The title read, My Grandmother's True Story, From Child Bride to CEO. It already had 10,000 views and was climbing rapidly. In the video, Tund had used photos from Mama Adunni's albums, his own narration, and screenshots of the documents Femi had sent. But he had framed it differently, as a story of survival, of a girl who refused to accept the life forced upon her, who built an empire from nothing, who raised a family and employed thousands. I told them everything, Tund said simply, about the forced marriage, about running away, about building the business, about Uncle Femi trying to kill you for money. I told them that you're my hero, not because you're perfect, but because you survived and helped others survive too. The family watched in amazement as the comments poured in. Women from across Nigeria, Africa, and the world were sharing their own stories. Hashtag Mama Adunni Strong was trending. Support was pouring in from women's rights organizations, from other survivors of child marriage, from young entrepreneurs inspired by her story. Then something extraordinary happened. The Market Women Association released their own video, with Aya Basira speaking. We stand with Mama Adunni. How many of us have secrets from when we were young and powerless? How many of us did what we had to do to survive? She is not defined by what was done to her as a child, but by what she built as a woman. Within hours, the narrative had completely shifted. What Femi had intended as blackmail material had become a rallying cry for women's empowerment. International media picked up the story. The British investors who had pulled out called back, saying they were impressed by the family's transparency and Tund's innovative crisis management. But Femi wasn't finished. That night, as the family celebrated their temporary victory, he made his final move. He filed a legal challenge to the company ownership and simultaneously released something else. A recorded conversation from 20 years ago where Mama Adunni allegedly discussed bribing government officials for contracts. The domestic betrayal was complete. Son against mother. using every weapon in his arsenal. The emotional manipulation had reached its peak. The question now was, could truth and public support overcome legal technicalities and old sins? Share this with someone who needs to hear a story of survival against all odds. What would you do in Mama Aduni's position? Comment below. The emergency board meeting at the Okonkwo Corporation headquarters had been called for dawn, an unusual time that reflected the extraordinary circumstances. The conference room on the 30th floor overlooked the awakening city of Lagos, its lights twinkling in the pre-dawn darkness. Mama Aduni sat at the head of the table, with Delhi and Saad flanking her. Across from them sat Femi with his allies, 3 board members he had cultivated over the years with promises of wealth once he took control. Young Tund was there too, sitting quietly beside his grandmother, a worn leather satchel on his lap. His parents had protested him attending such a tense meeting, but Mama Aduni had insisted. "The boy has earned his place at this table," she had said. The past week had been brutal. Femi's revelations about Mama Aduni's past had split the board of directors. Some supported her, moved by her story of survival. Others, particularly the more conservative members, felt the scandal was too much for the company to bear. The company's stock value had dropped by 60%. Major clients were pulling out, afraid of being associated with the controversy. "Let's not pretend this is anything other than what it is," Femi began, his voice cold and businesslike. "A takeover. I have the proxies from enough shareholders to control 51% of this company. The board members here support me. It's over, Mother. Sign the company over to me, and I'll allow you to retire with dignity. Fight me, and I'll ensure everyone knows about your bigamy, your lies, your fraud." "You already told everyone," Saad said bitterly. "You've destroyed our mother's reputation for your greed." "I've revealed the truth," Femi countered. "Something this family seems to have trouble with." Mr. Adeyemi, one of the board members supporting Femi, cleared his throat. "Mama Aduni, with respect, the company needs stable leadership. The scandal has hurt us badly. Perhaps it's time for new management." "New management?" Delhi laughed bitterly. "You mean the man who drugged his mother and tried to bury her alive?" "Alleged," Femi said smoothly. "Never proven. No charges filed. Just family drama and misunderstandings." Mama Aduni had been silent, studying her son's face. Finally, she spoke. "Femi, I have a question. The shares you claim to control, how did you acquire them?" Femi smiled. "Business, Mother. I've been buying them quietly for years, using shell companies' offshore accounts. All perfectly legal. Legal, perhaps, but not legitimate," Mama Aduni said. She nodded to Tund, who opened his satchel and pulled out a stack of old documents. "What's this?" Femi asked, his confidence wavering slightly. Tund stood up, his small stature dwarfed by the massive conference table, but his voice was strong and clear. "Uncle Femi, you taught me something important. You taught me that family secrets have power. So I went looking for yours." The boy spread the documents on the table. "These are bank records from 20 years ago. They show that you embezzled money from the company to buy those shares. You stole from Mama Aduni to buy pieces of her own company." Femi's face went pale. "Those records were destroyed." "I made sure." "You destroyed the digital copies," Tund interrupted. "But Mama Aduni's old accountant, Mr. Taiwo, kept paper copies in his garage. He remembered everything when I visited him with Aunt Saad. He even had recordings of you threatening him to keep quiet." The room erupted. The board members who had supported Femi began backing away from him, both literally and figuratively. Mr. Adeyemi stood up. "I had no knowledge of this. If these allegations are true, I withdraw my support immediately." "You can't prove anything," Femi shouted, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "Those documents could be forged." "Actually," Saad said, pulling out her tablet, "Mr. Taiwo is on video call right now from his home in Ibadan. Would you like to tell everyone what you told us, Mr. Taiwo?" The elderly man's face appeared on the screen, projected onto the conference room wall. His voice was shaky but determined. "Chief Femi threatened my family if I ever revealed how he stole money from the company accounts. He said he would destroy my children's futures. But I'm old now, and my conscience won't let me stay silent anymore. I have all the original documents, with his signatures, his instructions to falsify records. Everything. The board members were in uproar now. Femi looked around wildly, seeing his carefully constructed empire crumbling around him. But the most important document, Mama Adani said, her voice cutting through the chaos, is this one. She pulled out a single sheet of paper. Your father's will. The real one, not the forgery you've been using. Everyone fell silent. Femi's eyes widened in shock. You see, Mama Adani continued. Emeka knew what you were becoming, Femi. He wrote a second will, sealed and deposited with the family's oldest friend, Chief Ogbonna, who passed away last month. His son found it while going through his father's papers and brought it to me yesterday. She read from the will. To my son Femi, I leave my disappointment. You have the brilliance to build empires, but lack the heart to deserve them. The company shall remain with your mother, Adani, and upon her passing, be divided equally among all grandchildren, with young Tund, should he come to exist, serving as the conscience of the board until he comes of age. That's impossible. Femi gasped. Father died when Tund was 3 years old. How could he specifically name him? He didn't die when Tund was 3, Mama Adani said softly. He died when Tund was 7. You've been lying about the date to manipulate the will's timeline. But I have his real death certificate here, signed by Dr. Folake Adebayo, who was with him in his final moments. The revelation was the final blow. Femi slumped in his chair, his empire of lies collapsing completely. The board members were already discussing emergency measures, talking about removing Femi from all positions immediately. But it was what happened next that truly showed the family's character. Tund walked around the table to his uncle, who looked broken and defeated. Uncle Femi, the boy said quietly, Mama Adani taught me that family is everything. You did bad things, really bad things, but you're still family. Femi looked up, tears in his eyes, perhaps the first genuine tears he'd shed in decades. Mama Adani stood and walked to her son. Femi, you have a choice. Leave quietly. Take the retirement package we're offering, enough to live comfortably but not lavishly, and get help for this sickness in your soul. Or stay and fight, and lose everything, including your children's respect when they learn what their father really is. Why? Femi asked, his voice broken. Why show me mercy after everything I've done? Because, Mama Adani said, that's what makes us different from you. We choose family over revenge, love over greed, forgiveness over bitterness. Tund taught me that when he insisted on saving my life, even when everyone thought he was wrong. He saved me not just from the grave, but from becoming someone who could abandon her own son completely. The sun was rising now, flooding the conference room with golden light. Lagos was waking up below them, a city of 20 million people going about their lives, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded in this tower of glass and steel. Femi stood slowly, looking old and tired despite his 60 years. I'll take the retirement package, he said quietly, and I'll leave Lagos. Maybe distance will help me understand how I became this person. As he walked toward the door, he stopped beside Tund. You saved her twice, nephew. Once from the grave, once from having to destroy me completely. You're a better man at 9 than I am at 60. After Femi left, the board unanimously voted to keep Mama Adani as chairman, with Delhi as CEO and Saad as International Operations Director. They also created a new position, Youth Advisory Council, to be headed by Tund when he turned 16. The company would recover. The scandal would fade. The Okonkwo food distribution empire would emerge stronger, built now on complete transparency and truth. The domestic betrayal had been exposed and defeated not by revenge, but by forgiveness, not by adults, but by a child's wisdom. 6 months later, at the company's anniversary celebration, Mama Adani stood before thousands of employees and partners. Tund stood beside her, wearing a little suit that made him look older than his years. We nearly lost everything, she said to the crowd. I nearly lost my life. This company nearly lost its soul. But we learned that truth, no matter how painful, is better than comfortable lies. We learned that children see what adults miss. And we learned that she's not dead applies not just to a person, but to hope, to integrity, to family bonds that can survive even the worst betrayal. The crowd erupted in applause. Later, as the celebration continued, Tun found a quiet moment with his grandmother on the balcony. "Mama Adunni, do you think Uncle Femi will ever come back?" She looked out at the city lights, thinking, perhaps one day, when he's found peace, when he remembers who he was before money changed him. "And we'll forgive him. We already have, my child. Forgiveness isn't for him. It's for us. So we can live without the poison of hatred in our hearts." Tun nodded, wise beyond his years. "You know what I learned from all this, Mama?" "What's that?" "That being rich isn't about money. It's about having people who love you enough to save you, even from yourself." Mama Adunni pulled him close, tears in her eyes. "You're going to be a great man, Tund, greater than any of us." As they stood there, grandmother and grandson, the city of Lagos spread before them. They knew that the Okonkwo Empire would survive and thrive, not because of its wealth or power, but because it had been saved by the pure heart of a 9-year-old boy who refused to let his grandmother be buried alive and refused to let his family be buried under lies. The domestic betrayal had been defeated. The emotional manipulation had failed. The public disgrace had been transformed into public admiration. And somewhere in a small town far from Lagos, Femi Okonkwo sat alone, finally beginning to understand what he had lost in his pursuit of what he thought he wanted. But that, perhaps, was a story for another day. For now, the Okonkwo family was whole, stronger for having been tested, and ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. They had learned the most important lesson of all, that truth, love, and the innocence of a child's faith could overcome even the darkest betrayal. What would you do if faced with choosing between family and fortune? Comment below with your thoughts. Don't forget to like this story and subscribe for more tales of triumph over betrayal. Share this with someone who needs to remember that it's never too late for truth to prevail.